In order to knit our tiny doll hats, you need a miniature loom, and the link to make this mini loom is in the description box down below. You need a pair of scissors, a loom hook, a yarn needle, and some yarn. Any kind of color and just about any kind of yarn will do just fine for this project. We're going to begin by making a slip knot. And you can put that on any one of the pegs on your loom. And then we want to wrap our yarn around our loom in our counterclockwise method. So this counts as a single wrap, so our slip knot counts as a wrap, which means you want to wrap around the very next pin and then all the way around the next one. And because we have a mini loom, it's easy to keep our finger on our yarn to keep it under control as we wrap around the pegs. Try to keep the wrap nice and loose. That's why it's helpful to keep your finger on it, because if you wrap too tightly, it'll be very difficult to get all of the loops off of your pegs when it comes time to do the actual knitting. And once you've gone all the way around, you want to go all the way around for a second lap so that you've got 2 loops on every single peg. Once you've finished wrapping all the way around a second time, you should bring your working yarn out over top of where your little short tail is, and that's your start point. Eventually this will slip down underneath, but you'll still be able to see it, and you'll still know that this is your starting peg. You also know it's your starting peg because it's the last one that has 2 loops on it. If you wrapped again, you'd have 3, so that would be too many. Now you're going to take your loom hook. We're going to start at the first peg and take our slip knot and pass it up and over top of the loop that's on top of it. So right up and over top. Keep your finger on that other loop so that it doesn't want to come off the top, and then sort of squish it back down. And we're going to take all of our loops off in a clockwise method. So now we're going in the opposite direction that we did to do the wrapping. So keep your finger on that other loop, and if you need to pull up a little bit more, up and over top. In order to pick up the loop, sometimes you can cut the tiny little bit of the tip of your hook or your loop in between your bobby pins. And you just want to work your way all the way around, picking up the bottom loop, pulling it up and over top of the other loop and right off of your pins. Once you're back at the beginning, you should be down to only 1 loop on every single peg, and you can start wrapping all over again. Going in a counterclockwise direction, so the opposite direction to how we took our loops off. And you can just keep repeating this looping for a row and then working the loops off going the opposite direction until you've done this 10 times, or you have 10 rows of knitting on your little hat. I've knit about 10 rows, and you can count the vertical lines in between each stitch as a row. It's a little easier probably to see on your own knitting loom, or it's about as long as your mini knitting loom, which is approximately 4 centimeters in length. That's long enough for a miniature hat for one of our small dolls. So you can snip your yarn, and now you want to thread up that little tail in your yarn needle, and you can use a yarn needle with a big loop eye like I have, or just as long as the eye is big enough that your yarn can go through, and you want a nice tiny little tip to it. And we're going to start by taking off the first loop on our peg right where our yarn comes out of. So slip your yarn needle into that loop and make sure you get all of it, and then you can pull it right off and pull the yarn right through it. The first one might be a bit tricky, but the rest of them get pretty easy. And then you work the second one, And you can take off maybe a couple in a row if you feel you've got the strength for that. If not, just do them one at a time. Take your time, working all the way around. Make sure you get the whole loop and you don't pull off any others. You want to make sure you get them all threaded onto that same yarn. And you're going to do this one by one all the way around. Once you get to your last loop, scoop it up. You can pull the whole hat out of the loom now, and then pull your thread very strongly, very tightly to cinch up the top of that hat. And then you can pick up the first few loops again, and that will help cinch the whole thing shut. Then you can pull your thread through to the inside of the hat. So we'll just turn it inside out for a second here. And you can weave it back and forth through some of those loops. Tie yourself a little knot. So there's a few more loops. Now I'm just going to tie a simple little knot just so the whole thing doesn't come unraveled. We don't want our dolls to have cold heads. There we go. You can trim that yarn. And then you can take your little short tail that you started with, and you can weave it very carefully through some of the edge pieces, so the edge loops of your hat. I like to pick up a few first, and then thread up the tail of my short tail. Don't pull too tightly because you don't want to cinch the opening shut. There we go. Then you can turn your hat right side out. Trim off any little tiny edges that you see, like this little tail bit here. And then you can decorate it, and it's all ready for your doll to wear.